Hi there, welcome to the channel, thank you for joining us. I have done a couple of tutorials in the past, some about digital editing, some about paper cutting, but today we're going to be looking at how to make an indoor terrarium.
Indoor terrarium.
This is a Perspex fish tank which was given to me years ago actually from an office that no longer wanted it, and there's a good reason. If you fill this bad boy up with water and put fish in it, it just turns into a massive lens. So for half of the time you can't see any of the fish, and the other time they're enormous on the front. The optics of these fish tanks are terrible, which is why this has been used as a terrarium in the past for succulents. It actually sat in my greenhouse for a long time, which is why it's now crazed with lots of little cracks, so it could probably never hold water securely anyway. This has been sitting around in my apartment now for a long time, and today is the day that we're going to give it a new lease of life.
What is a terrarium?
So what is a terrarium? A terrarium is basically a closed ecosystem, usually glass. It can be completely sealed or it can be left vented slightly, and in there is going to be a whole ecosystem which is technically self-sustaining. Because the water that's going to be in here can't evaporate out, it creates a miniature water cycle inside and will keep all of your plants beautifully nourished. And so here we go, let's have a go at this. Honestly, I watched a couple of videos about locally foraged mosses, and I thought, I could probably find something green near my house, and I was absolutely astounded. Literally within 2 meters of my front door and the garden and in the alleyway at the back, I found probably 6 or 7 different species of moss. I will tell you all of the Latin names in 10 years when I've learned them, but for now they're green and short or green and long, and there's quite a variety of them. So let's dig in and see what we've got. These are just, again, foraged mosses. This one's got a bit of grass in it. If you came for a technical kind of exposition of kinds of mosses, go somewhere else. We're just going to be having fun with this. I've got some of these little guys. These are little succulents that grow really, really well in the wet and cold climate of Britain, which is where we are. We're in northern England, near Manchester. I've got some little guys, some more of these little guys here. Some little plants that I just plucked out of the ground, obviously making sure that there was enough to sustain them elsewhere. Some of these beautiful little alpines, again these came from one of my previous gardens. Picked up some lichen that my kids would call lichen, which is incorrect. Some more of these little succulents, little sproutling things. And some little plates of various different mosses, and I'll let you have a close-up look of these in a little while. We've also got some tiny little sprouty things that are probably weeds, but I'm not quite sure. We're just going to pop them in and see how they go. Very delicate little things, and these are all plants that are going to survive well in a really wet atmosphere. Also got some twigs and some dead wood from a fallen tree, which have got an amazing array of lichens on them. And at the bottom of this tub, I've got a whole collection of slates. This slate, again, is just taken from just around about my house. And we're going to use the slate as a drainage layer right at the very bottom when we come to build. We have got some really big pieces of dead wood, which I'll show you in detail in a minute, and a lovely old log. This came down in the storms just a few weeks back, and has collected some lovely lichens on it. We've got a few more hardy shrubs and bushes, and these are going to give a little bit of height to our design. I use the word design. I'm just going to stick them in there and it should look okay. The pièce de résistance is a couple of clumps of really interesting and beautiful mosses. There are probably 3 or 4 different kinds of moss just in this piece alone. And here we go, look at this one. Oh, how lovely is that? What a beautiful moss. I'm going to clean these up a little bit, make sure they've not got any roots and shoots and things sticking out of them, and I don't want any grass in there ideally. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Isn't that gorgeous? So we'll have a little close-up look at some of these in a mo. And finally, just a couple of smaller plants that just caught my eye. I've no idea what they are, but we're going to pop them in and see how they do. The only thing I know is that these guys have all been foraged from a 2 meter radius of my house, and I'm amazed at the variety. There's so much. Then I've just got a couple of bigger chunks of moss just to fill up any gaps. If you're looking for an expert video on how to build a terrarium, go down to one of the links in the description where there is a guy from Worcester Terrariums, I think, and he does a brilliant explanation of all of the deep science of terrariums. We're not going to be doing that, I'm just experiencing the build. Okay, so having got our plants ready, the first thing that we're going to need to do practically is make sure that our terrarium is really nice and clean. When I open this, I can smell that I had cleaned it out yesterday, and I can still smell a little bit of a chemical smell, so I'm going to go and give this one another clean.
6 hours later.
Okay, having given this guy a good old rinse, I'm happy now that there's no more chemical residue in there. Speaking of chemicals, when you come to water this, tap water is not going to be your friend because there are so many chemicals and extra minerals and additives within tap water, even in Greater Manchester, where we have the best tap water in the world, that it's just not going to do very well. And it may well discolour it and may adversely affect your plants. To that end, I stuck a jug underneath a gutter this morning, and in about 5 minutes, because it's so rainy outside, managed to collect some rainwater, and that's what I'm going to be watering my plants with. Okay, on to the build. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a lovely little kind of drainage layer with this slate. So I haven't bothered to wash this slate off because I figure I'm going to be putting soil on top of it. Okay, having put my layer of slate in there, I'm just going to make that fairly even. But I want a slight slope on my terrarium so that it's got kind of a front and a back. So I'm just going to pull some of these slates from the front to the back. Just so there's a little bit of an incline, and this is going to be the front. Okay. Next, a lot of terrarium builders suggest that you can put in a layer of charcoal, which will really help to clean everything. It's like a filtration layer, and as the water goes through, it's going to clean it and filter it, and it'll be a lot easier to keep the whole thing clean. I don't have any charcoal, so I'm not going to put any in. Most terrarium builders suggest that it's optional anyway, so I'm going to go right ahead and put in my substrate. And for my substrate, you guessed it, I've got some locally foraged soil, which I dug up from just behind my house. I'm also going to put in a little bit of succulent and cactus mix, which I've got left over, simply because this is quite a good layer of kind of roughage, which I'm going to hope will do a little bit of that filtering work for me as well. So I'm going to stick this in first. It was just something I had left over. Thank you for that. So we'll just set this around over the slate a little bit, and then we'll go straight in with our soil. I'm just going to dump it all in, and then we can landscape a little bit. One of the good things about using foraged soil rather than a packet mix from a garden centre is that this mix has already got lots of microbial life that these plants are used to because they're all from the same place, okay? Because it's local, because it's come from the garden, the same garden that these guys were in. I know that the bugs in here are going to be good for them. I know the bacteria in here is going to be good for them. So I'm just going to create a bit of a hill, nothing too fancy, and just pat that down ever so slightly, just like that. Brilliant! We are ready to put our plants in. So I'm going to start off by just taking a few of the pieces of moss and popping those in at the edges. Moss is brilliant because you can just break it into any shape that you need and stick it in. And just as I do this, I'm just going to be taking out any bits of grass and sticks that I don't particularly want in my mix. But as you can see, the bottom of this is beautifully mulchy, and that's going to adhere to the soil really well. You can also be very, very firm with moss. You can really jab it down, and it's quite resilient. Now, before I put any more in, what I'm going to do is just spend a little moment just wiping down the sides of the glass, because it's going to be easier before we put more moss in. I said glass, it's Perspex. But we want to make sure that this is nice and clean, because if we try and clean it out when it's got plants in, that's going to be a real tough job. Clearly I'm using an old tea towel, not a dinner shirt. There we go. Beautiful. Alright, let's crack on with the build. We might do this sped up. Hello. Do you want to live in my terrarium? There are a few little creepy crawlies here, and I'm going to pay special attention to make sure that they go in, because they're going to be good for the plants.
Voilà, c'est fini.
Okay, I'm really pleased with that. I'm really pleased with that. So here is our finished terrarium. I am so pleased with how this has turned out. Just feels like it's looking really natural. Pop inside. There's the layout of it, just going front to back. managed to get such a beautiful array of different mosses and lichens, and I took the decision to just put a lot of the broken sticks in and the deadwood later on because they just look so natural. This to me just represents everything that I love about being outdoors in northern England, and to have that inside is lovely. I was really pleased as well with a couple of the higher little shrubs at the back which just give it a little bit of height, and I'm hoping as well that in time some of these other little plants are going to start sprouting up and shooting up and adding a bit of height. Well, having got all of the plants in there, and I cannot tell you how pleased I am with how this has turned out. The last thing to do is to give it a quick water. There are a few options when you're watering a sealed terrarium. You can completely seal it up, and some people say that they can last up to 6 months without any kind of water. We know that there are people that have been on the internet saying, oh, I've had this terrarium sealed for 20 years. I'm sure that's going to work as well. I'm not going to seal mine because I'm quite aware that these guys are going to need some kind of airflow. So I have got a lid, and it is going to sit on top. It's not sealed. Oh, that needs fixing. It's not sealed as yet, but I'm going to be able to give it a little bit of breathing space every now and again. Having said that, I've just decanted some of the rainwater into my little spritzer here, and I'm just going to spritz the whole thing, bearing in mind the soil's already damp, the slate was already damp, the plants are already damp, having been stormed on for a few days. But I'm just going to spritz this, get it on a mist setting, and I'm just going to mist all of those plants. Just to help them firm up, just to help them bed in. And the lovely thing about this is that I hope that it will be quite forgiving, in that if there's too much water in here, with this being inside, my apartment is average about 19 degrees upstairs, which is where it's going to live. So if I leave the lid off, it's going to lose some of that excess moisture if it's got too much. One other crucial thing is about light, because you do not want your terrarium in direct sunlight. That's because this is going to become a miniature greenhouse. It is going to need some light, so near a north facing window is going to be ideal for this. This one's going to live in my kitchen, by my kitchen window, where it never gets any direct sunlight, but it will get plenty of light so that these guys can photosynthesize, unlike all my plants which are absolute sun lovers, which live in the fish tank window right here. Well, that literally took an hour to forage all of the plants, to get everything together, and to make a video about it. So why don't you have a go at making your own indoor terrarium, and check back in a few weeks and we'll see how this one's doing. Thanks so much for watching.